Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back.
Welcome back, guys. So, I saw a message from a Patreon and they said, did you do anything ever on the Akashic records? And I know we brought it up many times, but I'm not sure if we actually ever just did one on the Akashic records. So we want to touch on that and also consciousness in general. And again, there's so many people that have no clue about these things, unfortunately, in the masses. No clue at all to the fact of consciousness being something that is all pervasive and accessible.
I think that's the key word, is accessible. Everything is accessible. To what degree depends on you and what you have set up for this lifetime. So, how much information is too much? You're the one who is guiding that ship before you came here, but it's still an interesting topic. And one thing I can tell you for sure is you will have access to the information that you need all throughout this lifetime.
Yeah, it makes me think of a conversation with one of our very, very gifted people that we talk to on a regular basis, and her name begins with a J, and she's done a lot of energy work and studied Qigong and stuff, and is, she at one time said, why did I set myself up to not perceive things as clearly as I now want to be able to perceive them? And that's a great question.
Because you want to be better at what you're doing. It's going to give you that drive. It's going to give you that desire to try harder, to reach further, because this is all about expansion. At the core of everything, at the very basic core, it is expansion, expansion, expansion. So if you want to learn something, you're going to come into this earth with the desire. And this goes into your chart too, Rahu Ketu chart. Where's your Rahu? You're going to have that desire, but you might not have all the information to fulfill that desire. So that's what drives us. That's what pushes us. That's what motivates us, is that desire.
Absolutely. What we acquire in this lifetime, we take with us as far as experiences. We won't take anything physical, but we take the experiences. And we can go back and revisit those experiences. We could play them out in different manners. And this is really part of the life review. So many of us are so used to, things like the cloud, the term the cloud. Well, did you back it up to the cloud? Is it just on the local PC, or did you back it up to a cloud? Well, we can understand that to a degree now. I think at least everybody but maybe great grandma hasn't heard of that before, uploading to the cloud. Well, with our experiences, everything is, to use that term, uploaded to the Akashic cloud.
It is. It's tapped into our energy fields. It's tapped into our cells. It's tapped into our 3D DNA, but also the energetic part of DNA. It's all there. And I would say probably the easiest thing to have access to when you're dealing with the Akash is access to ancestral records, ancestral know-how, being able to tap into that line again and ask information and ask for, hey, how do I do this? Ask for, can you please, show me some information so I can figure this out? If you're one who comes from a line of farmers and ranchers and you're setting out on your own, learning to do this on your own, you can ask the ancestors, hey, can you guys please surround me? And actually what happens is the energies come into your energy field, and it's like your subconscious, your DNA starts to pick up, and then at that point you want to simply start following your intuition. This does take some time to develop, but it's developable for anybody and for everyone if you have a desire.
Okay, so this analogy just came to me. Now, she's talking about tapping into DNA lineage. And when you think, this is just going off on a little bit of a tangent, as we know, there's this tradition among the blue bloods, and then that's a whole video in and of itself. The blue bloods, as to intermarrying within certain bloodlines. Well, that's kind of like keeping your router connected into a local network, that you're not going to allow other networks to come in and tap into, per se. Now, when we do end up tapping into other DNA strands, other lineages, in many cases, these lineages can be literally tapping into entirely new star families.
I mean, it's really never ending. I think we're just trying to keep it local so that folks can understand. But then after you have this understanding, then you can start looking into the outer edges of things and going bigger and bigger and bigger and beyond. But I think one of the easiest ways is understanding just your very basic ancestral DNA lineage and knowing you have access to that and those records.
And obviously you have access to your past lives. That's a given as well when we're not in the body. When we're in the body, again, it depends on the situation. Every single incarnation is unique. And so when we look at in our world, what does that cloud look like? Well, here's Google's. And it's definitely very tangible. Yet, if we want to talk about us, we are like drops of rain in the ocean of consciousness. So when we talk about the Akashic, it's something that we can all tap into, again, when we're out of the body. In the body, there's certain parameters that we have set up. And again, I think there's this tendency to always, blame things on everything that's external without the realization that, some of the limitations you imposed on yourself in order to learn something new.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We do these things because we want to learn and discover different aspects of ourselves, but in the same general idea or the same range of information. And it really is about expanding yourself whenever these limitations are put on you. You're setting yourself up for expansion. And I think that's a good thing. I know we've talked about Bess before, and Mike, he asks me quite often, what's Bess doing? And what Bess does is Bess is reading out of the book of Akashic records. And Mike says, oh yeah, well, what does it say? So I went into the part where there should be letters, and there's all these rainbows. There's all kinds of different colored lights, and he's actually absorbing that information. So that's what it looks like for me to look at Bess looking at his own Akashic so that he can understand his other lives, what he's going to be doing on his next life. So that will be a good visual for you.
Yeah, and Bess is our buddy, and he was, he's one of the ones that came here at the same time, basically, we did with Aset, and then we stayed and have been reincarnating, and, since then here on this planet. But again, many of us, from our understanding, about a third of the incarnate souls, roughly, have incarnated in other star systems or planets before. So that's a big percentage of people that have had experiences. And I do think that explains to a degree why some of us totally get it. We totally have no problem conceptualizing life elsewhere. And then others, there's 2/3 then that gives us that haven't had experiences incarnating elsewhere. Younger souls, newer souls per se. Well, that could be part of the reason why they have a harder time of conceptualizing that. And then, of course, the system is always fostering a certain, blinders on viewpoint.
And maybe there's sometimes when you're just simply not allowed that information for reasons that higher self just is not going to tell you. And that's probably one of the things that gets to me the most. It's like, oh my gosh, I want this information and I can't have it. But reaching a place of acceptance is helpful there. And then just asking your guides, look, if I'm allowed this information, can you please help me find a path to get it, to receive it, something. So it's all about this conversation between you, your higher self, your guides, your angels, your ancestors. And it is very much like a conversation to people too. I think that's something that we lose when we're dealing with those that are not embodied. It truly is, that part of it still is a conversation. And when you are thinking about Uncle Joe, who has passed, Great Uncle Joe, when you think about Great Uncle Joe, it's like picking up a phone and it's like calling, because then he hears that information and then he can come to you. And then at that point, there's a two-way.
So Bess has been diligently studying because, you know, he's thinking about coming into, again, an embodied existence. And he didn't experience the Kali Yuga per se, but this is, again, part of what we are always trying to get across. You know, the beings that we see in the Kali Yuga are very limited because our perceptions are very limited. And, you know, basically we're under this darker control structure. In the Bronze Age, it's a mix. You know, on the Bronze Age, on the descending, as we're really starting to dip towards that Kali Yuga, really we're surrounded by darker entities. And then in the beginning of the Bronze Age, same thing. And then as we come out of it, you start to encounter more and more benevolent energies. And, you know, again, beings like Bess, he was thought that he was Egyptian god, but in reality, he was an extraterrestrial. You know, this is what he is. This is, again, you know, when you really look to all the beings that they were taken as gods, these were just extraterrestrials. They were beings that had a much better understanding of things than the people that were here on the planet indigenously, or as close to indigenously as we can be. We can, again, relate it to, there are still tribes that live a very, very basic primal experience, totally in sync with nature. And, you know, they don't understand the technical cloud. They don't understand all the craziness that we of this whole construct are just so used to. They understand a very different picture than us. And so Bess, just one amongst so many extraterrestrials that was worshipped as a god and viewed as a god, but was just somebody with a much more advanced understanding of how things work. And now he's just been studying intently, getting ready for his next incarnation.
Mm-hmm. So when you see information, you see it completely different than what you would see in 3D. You're going to see it via light, because light is information. So when you go through these Akashic records, when you're walking down the halls, there are beings who do guard certain areas. There are things you're going to see light, and it's almost like telepathic. This information is telepathic. It's going to come through you, not in letters of understanding like reading, but it's going to come through in a channeled manner. And this is where it can get frustrating, because you're only going to get the information that you need for this lifetime. And it could be that this information that you seek, it might not be ready to be received by you just yet. Higher self is a very good guard of information, what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed not to see, because higher self knows where you're at emotionally. And sometimes some information might be way too much for you to handle right now emotionally, but maybe in 2 years from now, you can handle it. So you can look at higher self as very much like a gatekeeper.
Absolutely. So again, Everything in this world is basically upside down, inside out, and we can definitely take it with a grain of salt. Here you have from medicalpress.com, study sheds light on where conscious experience resides in the brain. So, when you look at this, medical news today, how does the human brain create consciousness and why? Because it doesn't. Consciousness utilizes the brain. Consciousness is not limited to the brain. Of course, this is a key thing to really realize. The whole false construct that we find ourselves in with the Western medical tradition and Western religious philosophical tradition, mainstream, is based on this premise. And based on the premise that, you only live once. Well, no, you don't. Again, you have to be born again and again and again and again to learn, to grow, to have new experiences that you can fall back on. It's fascinating. We can reconstruct experiences in our mind. And one thing now that I notice so clearly as I do recall all my dreams. Every morning I wake up, I know what my dreams were. And it's because I've written them down since I was, a little kid. I haven't been writing them down lately because they really do stay in the mind. And I feel like I could call them up more and more easily all the time and remember them pretty clearly. And in some cases get new, fresh insights. Oh yeah, I had forgotten that part. Well, again, consciousness doesn't reside in the brain. And we could spend multiple videos just giving examples of people that were flatlined and they could still describe what was going on in wherever that location was, in a hospital or what have you, that they were clinically dead. Their consciousness didn't stop. They could tell you, the nurse with the long blonde hair, she came in and then she ran, she got the doctor, and then he came in, then he went. Yeah, they could give you the whole 9 yards. They've seen everything from a different perspective. This changes everything because part of what the system wants to sell you is their version of eternal life, which is basically replacing parts as needed and eventually merging man with machine. And thus what they're trying to do is to trap consciousness. That's what they're trying to do. So they can utilize the God spark as long as possible for its energy. It's all about energy. So, the human brain does not create consciousness. It's completely back-assward. And that's why it's so hard for people to understand. In our standard view of things, consciousness exists only in the brains of highly evolved organisms. Now that gets us then looking at things, and you'll have people saying, well, that monkey doesn't have a soul. Only humans have souls. Or that bird doesn't have a soul. It doesn't really have consciousness. The fish doesn't have consciousness. You couldn't be any more wrong. This world really has such a lack of understanding on the bigger fundamental things. These are basic things, and we're taught wrong. We are taught nothing but lies. Yet we can find the truth. It's hidden in the Western mystery tradition. It's hidden in Hermeticism, Gnosticism. You can find it if you look into the Kabbalah, and you can find it in the Eastern traditions. Because really, ultimately, consciousness is everywhere. Panpsychism. Consciousness is the fundamental. There is nothing more fundamental than consciousness. Again, we are all individual drops in the ocean of consciousness. So then we're all interconnected. We could tap into each other at any time we really truly understand this. And when we're not in a dark age, we do communicate just with thoughts.
And I think scientists, the cold, they want cold, hard facts. So they're going to point to a monkey, they're going to point to a bird, and they're going to say, these are just chemical makeups, and these things make this thing react, and it does these things just out of basic survival. But that's so not true. I mean, there's so much consciousness within every single thing. It's a common practice for indigenous Native Americans to go inside the consciousness of an eagle and see through those eagle's eyes and be able to have those feelings and those emotions. And when we're talking about consciousness being drops all belonging to the same ocean, even when those drops are in the air, there's still, where does one start and where does one stop? But if you look in the different etheric realms, the etheric nature of things, there really is no starting or stopping point. It's just energy that is thick and energy that is thinner, but everything is always, always, always connected. You know, Mike and I are sitting close to one another right now, but I guarantee you, if you see it energetically, we are we are so extremely intertwined, and in that, that energy has almost its own self. It just keeps getting more stronger, you know, as we work on people, and as we live together, we finish each other's sentences. We get more often than not, you know, we can kind of do a lot of mind reading because we could do that before. And it's just when you are physically close to someone, it gets stronger. But that doesn't mean that if you're far from someone, you cannot tap into their consciousness and see and feel and know what they are doing, because that's the intertangled web of everything. Everything's connected.
And if you are one of those people that are brought up in the Abrahamic traditions, again, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and those things are what are comfortable, or any particular aspects of those things are comfortable, and you're not comfortable with other terminology, or looking at things from a Vedic perspective, or, you know, some other perspective, then maybe look into Hermeticism, or do some deeper study of the Kabbalah. This book is, again, a book that I think we've done 1 or 2 videos on in the past, and it's Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics. And, you know, Hermeticism, Hermes has been equated with Thoth and Mercury again, as in the deity Mercury, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, all those things. This is a good book. This is a good book to start with. And, you know, again, I don't think it was a coincidence that when I was 7 years old, we moved into a new house, and this was the only item left by the previous owners in that house. And I found it down in a dark corner of a, you know, dirt floor basement that was creepy as anything. And, you know, I tried since I was 7 years old to understand it. It took maybe until I was 10 or 11 to really start to get it. But this is all about understanding from a combination of different sources, including the Vedic traditions, the yogic traditions, how the universe works. So according to he words it as Indian secession of the tattvas. Tattvas, again, are essences and manifestations. Well, you know, how does this world come about? Well, you know, earth, air, fire, and water, right? The 4 elements, we all know that. And then in the Western world, we conceptualize above that is spirit. Well, here, you know, we have Akasha, which is the principle of the ether. And just think, when we were looking at that, you know, teepee, what should we call it? See if I kept it up here. Now there's Grandma. I moved it. But anyway, that little networking device where you plug your Ethernet cords into, or your Ethernet cords into. Yeah, ether. Again, everything that they give us is a reflection of that which is naturally in existence. but it's kind of distortion of it. It's like a distorted perversion of the real. So the principle of the ether, the Akash or Akasa, and then you have Tejas, the principle of fire, Waju, principle of air, Apas, principle of water, and Pravithi, principle of earth, as it goes on down from the ether into fire, air, water, and earth, creating the manifest universe. So the manifest universe comes out of the ether. It comes out of the Akash. So everything is imprinted in the Akash and can be accessed.
More often than not, you're going to see all the information when you're out of body, not while you're in body. So these bodies are created deliberately for your own growth. They are created limited, but that doesn't mean you'll never have access to certain informations, but you will have access to that in which you need to help you learn and help you grow. And if you're needing information and it's just not showing up, there's a reason for that. So trusting the higher self, knowing that higher self is that gatekeeper, I think is a really good idea to help bring you some kind of peace.
So let me just read you this little bit in this, because what's one of the main practices that he gives, and which I spent much time on as a young child, and then constantly revisiting this as a teenager in my 20s and then again my 30s. It's on meditations that involve understanding the elements. And this had me totally immersing myself in water as, again, a teenager, trying to get as perfectly close to body temp as possible in order to induce a certain level of experience. And, we have now, of course, we have sensory deprivation tanks, and there's places out there, probably if you're by a big city, you could probably go and have an experience like that yourself. All these are about inducing the sensations of the elements and understanding of the elements, and ultimately control over those elements in your mind and body as well. Things like meditating out in the sunlight and feeling the sun, communing with the sun, communicating with the sun, literally. And thus being able to, again, control that aspect of the self. In accordance with the Hindu doctrine, it can be said, or the yogic doctrine, that the four elements, somehow the grosser elements, have descended from the fifth, the Akasha. Consequently, Akasha is the cause ultimate, and to be regarded as the fifth power, the so-called quintessence. In one of the following chapters, he goes on in detail. But the key to understand that is to go and really understand the elements first from which it comes. So yeah, there's no one simple meditation that will induce any sort of understanding in everybody. Everybody is unique. You have set your own limitations upon yourself, as Cindy was saying, before coming into the body. But I'll definitely link this PDF for you guys. And there are also symbols you can meditate on, and he goes into that as well. And, again, nothing comes quick. And the reality is it does take lifetimes in order to really be able to manifest things on the level of magi or, an advanced yogic practitioner in many cases. But you might not know whether or not you've had those lifetimes already. So for some people, it'll come awful quick. And you might say, wow, they're just a natural.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It might just come naturally. So hopefully you guys got something useful out of this and something fun. And I'm all for reading books and getting information. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes from you. You're the one who has to understand it and accept it.
Absolutely. As always, guys, thanks for your support on Patreon and Ko-Fi. God bless and namaste.
Namaste.